I am is not a religious phrase, not a positive affirmation, and certainly not a mindless repetition tool like many are using today. I am is the foundation of being, the root of all manifestation in your life. Every time you utter those two words, you are knocking on the most sacred door within yourself, the place where the boundaries between your finite self and the infinite source flowing through you dissolve. Most of what people call life is actually just a reflection of forgetting. They forget that everything coming into their experience does not originate from the outside world, but from how they define themselves internally. I am miserable, I am worthless, I am not enough. They don't realize that these aren't just statements, they are declarations that create their reality. Life doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to what you believe is true about yourself. And what you believe always begins with two words: I am. I am is not a way to command the universe, it is how you become one with it. When you say, I am peace, you're not trying to become peaceful. You are removing the inner barriers so that peace can express through you. When you say, I am light, you are not inventing something new. You are acknowledging what has always been there but was once denied. The power of the words I am lies in this: whatever you place after them becomes a decree, whether or not you are aware of it. And that is why people continue to live within their limits without understanding why things never seem to improve, because they are unconsciously declaring those limits every day. Nothing happens in your life without passing through two checkpoints: belief and inner identity. You may wish for success, but if you keep repeating, I am someone who always fails, then your entire nervous system, behavior, choices, and intuition will begin to align with affirming that identity. I am is the key that unlocks the door of manifestation, but it can also be the chain that binds you to an outdated past. Once you understand the true nature of I am, you will never use it carelessly again. You will never say, I am bad, even in jest, because every time you repeat that, you're not joking with others. You're unconsciously renewing a contract with the diminished version of yourself you once hoped to outgrow. The truth is, no one needs to become anything. You don't have to try to be peaceful, healthy, or abundant. All of that already exists in the deepest layers of your soul. The only issue is that you have forgotten it and used I am to affirm false layers imposed by society, memories, wounds, or fear. Manifestation is not about attracting something new. It is about removing what does not belong to your essence, so that your truth can naturally reveal itself, and there is no simpler or more direct way to begin that journey than by choosing again what you say after I am. No need for a meditation room, no need for expensive classes. Just stand in front of the mirror each morning and with clarity, honesty, and awareness declare, I am light, I am wisdom, I am divine power. And then, throughout your day, let every action, every decision, every reaction flow from that, not as a technique, but as a non-negotiable truth. You will begin to notice something strange. The things you used to chase start moving toward you. The issues that used to trouble you dissolve, and the possibilities you once thought were beyond you become natural, not because the world changed, but because you changed how you defined yourself in it. Some may ask, if I'm in a hopeless situation, isn't it fake to say I am free? The answer is no, because the freedom you're speaking of does not come from circumstances. It comes from a deeper layer within you, where you are never bound by external conditions. You're not pretending, you are declaring a truth that transcends your current reality. And if you stay loyal to that truth, your circumstances will lose their power over you. Those who use I am as a conscious act are no longer victims of their environment, they become the architects of it. I am doesn't change the world instantly, but it changes the one who speaks it. And when that person changes, everything else becomes a chain reaction. Thoughts change, choices change, relationships shift, opportunities appear, not because you learned a new technique, but because you remembered who you are. Every manifestation formula begins here. You cannot manifest what you do not believe you are. You cannot attract health if you keep affirming, I am weak. You cannot live a wealthy life if you still hold on to the label, I am lacking. Transformation doesn't come from effortful striving. It comes from reuniting with your original whole self through the two most powerful words, I am. There is no prerequisite to deserve good things. You don't need to do enough to be allowed to say, I am strong. You don't need to achieve something first to say, I am abundant. That's the thinking of the old ego, always looking for external proof to validate internal worth. But the soul does not need proof. It only needs expression. And the only thing blocking that expression is the false declarations you repeat daily. These are not undone by resistance, but by replacing them with truth. You are not here to seek worth. You are here to express the divine essence that has always been within you. And every genuine journey of growth is a journey back to these two words, but this time with awareness, with mindfulness, and with deep gratitude. I am, and that is the beginning of all creation. Have you ever wondered why, despite begging so much, desperately even, what you wished for still didn't come true? Have you ever knelt down offering prayers from the depths of your heart only to be met with silence, as if life never heard you? It's not because you're unworthy, and it's certainly not because God is distant or indifferent. It's because you are using a language the universe does not respond to, the language of lack. Every time you plead from a place of fear, you are affirming that you are in a state of not having, and you forget that the universe doesn't respond to desire, it responds to the frequency you emit. You want good things, but you speak to the universe as if you're powerless. You pray as if you're on the outside, hoping for some distant power to reach down and grant you a favor. Meanwhile, that power is still waiting for you, not out there, but within you. But it does not operate when you beg. It only moves when you declare. The issue is not your sincerity, it's that you are asking for what already exists, like someone searching for water while surrounded by the ocean, like someone seeking light in the middle of the day. You don't need to beg for light. You only need to open your eyes. You don't need to beg for God. You only need to stop denying Him within yourself. Every time you say, please help me, you are unconsciously saying, I cannot. And that becomes the truth you live by. But if you change that plea into, thank you for you have helped me, then everything shifts. Because now you are no longer broadcasting the frequency of lack, but of gratitude. No longer of waiting, but of certainty. And that is when miracles no longer need to be forced, they are allowed to appear. The question I want you to consider right now is this. Has the time come for you to stop begging? Has the time come for you to stop looking to the sky and start looking within yourself, where God has always silently waited for your agreement? Agreement to let Him operate through you, not through pleading, but through expression. Agreement to no longer be the one chasing miracles, but to become the living miracle in motion. If you're ready, let me know. Let the silence end. Let me not be the only voice echoing into this void, even if you leave just one comment. Whether I'm ready or simply the number one, that too is your way of saying, I begin now, right here, and I will see you. I will feel you. I will know you are there. As someone yearning to move beyond the plea and start living, as a declaration. To me, the one writing these words, your presence is not just a number. It is proof of something far more precious. You no longer want to live passively. You have chosen manifestation. And for someone like me, who creates content, that is the deepest gift I could receive. Remember, from now on, don't ask, how can I get that? Start with, I am the one who has that. Don't beg for what you lack. Live as the one who already possesses it. Don't wait to see a miracle before you believe. Believe so completely that you live as if the miracle has already happened. When you stop asking and start manifesting, not through pleading, but through a grounded presence, then the entire order of the world begins to shift because of you. The universe doesn't need your tears. It needs your awakening. And if today is the moment you open your eyes, lift your head high and say, I am the creator of my own reality, then I want you to leave that sign right here beneath this video so that I can reach out to you with the deepest respect. You don't need to ask anymore. You only need to remember who you are and begin to live as if that truth has never left you, because in reality, it never has. There are not two opposing powers wrestling in this universe. There is only one. And that power is not somewhere far away, nor hidden in some mysterious metaphysical dimension. It is present in the very life force moving through you. Everything else, the so-called opposition, evil, wrongness, or lack, is nothing more than an illusion created by the dividing mind. When you believe there are two forces, one to fight against and one to plead for protection from, you unconsciously step into the fog of inner conflict, where all manifestation is distorted, and your faith constantly needs to test itself, to be validated. True faith does not require validation. It only needs to be lived. And to live in that faith, you must understand one profound truth. The only power operating in this universe is the power of goodness, and you are an inseparable part of it. All religions, all spiritual traditions, all sacred symbols lead back to the same origin. There is only one absolute power, not because that belief is popular, but because it is an irreplaceable truth. When you still believe that there is a force working against you, whether it be fate, karma, circumstances, or other people, you are unconsciously stripping power from yourself and assigning it to something external. You begin to fear, you react, you become guarded. And from that moment on, every decision you make carries the seed of doubt, even if you are praying, meditating, or affirming positively. Because at the deepest level of consciousness, you're still entangled in one thing: separation. The belief in separation is the root of all suffering. It makes you live like an outsider, constantly seeking protection from some higher force, not realizing that you are the flow of that very force. Look closely at every expression in your life. Wherever there is conflict, there you believe in two powers, one that wants good for you and one that hinders you. But if you acknowledge that there is only one power, and it is goodness, then even what you call an obstacle is actually part of the creative path, perfectly placed, perfectly timed, and perfectly formed for something better to emerge. God does not need to defeat anything in order to triumph. He doesn't need to destroy darkness, because darkness has no true force. It is merely the absence of light. Likewise, lack has no separate existence. It only appears when you forget the nature of abundance. Illness is not a force that opposes life. It is a signal showing that you've drifted away from inherent harmony. Fear has no independent power. It is simply the space where faith has not yet taken root. When you acknowledge that everything not born from goodness is an illusion, a temporary phenomenon without solid substance, you begin to withdraw the power you once gave to the wrong places. Nothing happens outside of the one power. No calamity slips past the reach of goodness. There has never been a moment when you were abandoned. Even in your most intense trials, that power is still present, not to test you, but to help you remember you belong to it. And when you remember that, the game of fear ends. You no longer see the world through the eyes of a victim. You no longer pray in the voice of a stranger. You no longer define yourself by the broken fragments of the past. You begin to live as an extension of that power, a stable anchor for every expression waiting to be released. Many people mistake the acknowledgement of one power only as a naive belief, as if it means ignoring evil, hardship, or chaos. But the truth is the exact opposite. The one who understands the soul power best is the one who has seen the world's disorder, but is no longer hypnotized by it. That person does not deny reality, but sees through it, does not flee the darkness, but brings in the midst of it, does not avoid challenge, but stands in the midst of it with an unshakable presence, not because they are stronger than others, but because they no longer believe in a second power. From the moment you accept that there is no real opposition to goodness, every choice becomes clear. You no longer make decisions out of fear. You no longer react from a sense of threat. You no longer try to protect yourself from the world. Instead, you begin to express from the level of awareness where there is only one power, and you belong to it. Your actions become more precise, more graceful, more powerful, not because you're forcing anything, but because you are no longer wasting energy on doubt. Things begin to unfold, not because you push, but because you no longer resist. The one power does not need your belief to exist, but when you believe, you enter its flow. You don't have to create clarity. You only need to align with it. You don't need to make the light appear. You only need to stop covering your eyes. When you stop believing in two, you begin to live as one. When you stop splitting reality into good and bad, you step into a realm where everything serves your unfold. There is nothing left to fight against and nothing more to beg for. You need only hold one thing firm. The only power is goodness, and you, not only gifted by it, but are its living expression in this very world. This is not just a beautiful belief, it is the firmest foundation on which you can build your life. Every system, every technique, every method is only effective when built upon this truth. Otherwise, they are merely clever disguises for old fears. But when you begin from the awareness, I live within one power, and that power is goodness, then everything you do, say, think, and create carries a clarity that cannot be distorted. And that is when life stops reacting to you and begins walking with you, not because you've done enough, but because you have returned to your true essence. And in that essence, you lack no power. You are an inseparable part of it. No word you utter carry more power than the two words, I am. They are not merely the beginning of a sentence. They are the starting point of a creation. Every time you say, I am, you are issuing an invisible command, an internal decree that the law of life registers and engraves. You're not merely describing yourself, and life, like a mirror of absolute honesty, will reflect back what you declare by handing you circumstances, experiences, emotions, and results that match the frequency you've just set. If you say, I am inadequate, you are not just making an observation, you are signing off on a version of yourself, and every choice that follows will orbit around that identity. If you say, I am lucky, you are synchronizing your entire mind and emotions with an energetic field where opportunities begin to emerge, not by magic, but through alignment. No one lives beyond what they assign to themselves. Successful people aren't just different in action, they are different in what they call themselves. They don't need to shout it to the world, but they live with a clear internal dialogue. I am someone who creates value. I am someone who is trusted. I am someone who can. Thought does not exist in neutral space. Every thought automatically attaches itself to the command, I am, whether you are conscious of it or not. When you feel disappointed and say, I am useless, you are not just venting, you are unintentionally accepting a new definition of yourself. From that moment on, the brain begins to collect evidence to confirm that definition as truth. You miss out on good opportunities because you think you're unworthy. You hold back from making choices because you believe you're not capable. You hesitate to express yourself for fear of being wrong. But the error doesn't lie in the circumstance, it lies in the sentence you just uttered without realizing its weight. I am is not a phrase meant to beautify language. It is the activation code for your entire system of beliefs, physiological responses, thought patterns, and behaviors. Because the human mind needs an identity to operate. And here's the catch. Whatever you place after I am, the mind treats it as a central command. It does not analyze right or wrong. It simply obeys. It begins to cut off anything that doesn't match the new identity and draws in everything that does. The statement, I am weak, eliminates the possibility of decisive action because the mind does not allow contradiction. The statement, I am steady, causes you to remain calm in adversity, not because you try, but because there is no room left for the fragile self-image to operate. In truth, every word you speak about yourself is a form of prayer, not one directed upward, but inward. You are speaking to the very creative energy within you. Create this. And that energy is absolutely faithful. It never argues with you. It simply materializes what you affirm to be true. And if what you affirm is limitation, what you receive will always resemble that limitation. You cannot say, I am a victim of circumstance, and expect life to hand you the power of mastery. You cannot say, I am not good enough, and demand others believe in you. You cannot plant seeds of doubt and expect to harvest the fruits of stability. On the other hand, a small shift in how you define yourself can activate an entire chain of positive reactions. When you begin to say, I am someone who is growing, the mind opens up to the possibility of change. When you say, I am someone who learns from mistakes, you turn defeat into wisdom. When you say, I am someone worthy of love, you will no longer tolerate fragile relationships because you no longer align with them. The identity you assign to yourself is not just a label. It becomes the filter through which life casts you into the right storyline. Many people repeat positive affirmations yet see no change in their lives because they don't truly believe what they're saying. They recite, I am strong, but internally whisper, I'm just pretending. And that thin veil of doubt renders their words ineffective. You cannot use I am as a magic spell without awareness. Only when you speak it with full presence, with an unwavering inner belief, do the words you say become a law of life. And the law of life does not betray the one who lives in alignment with it. The greatest danger is not that you don't know who you are, but that you are misdefining yourself without realizing it. You use I am to repeat stories others imposed on you. I am an introvert. I am shy. I am the type who isn't made for success. You say it as if it were objective truth, but it's really just unconscious decisions you once accepted due to past wounds or failures. And each time you repeat them, you tighten the very rope that binds you. You can untie that rope. You don't need others to validate you. You don't need achievements as proof. You only need to begin with a new decision. I am an awakening being. I am someone who has the right to redefine myself. I am strong enough to change the story of my life. And then, day by day, let every thought, word, and action you take align with that new identity, not to become something distant, but to return to what you have always been. Because the truth is, you have never lacked the power to change your life. You've only lacked one thing, a definitive, conscious, fearless declaration that I am, and the rest of that sentence will determine everything else that follows. Prayer is not an act of pleading. It is a choice of consciousness. When you still believe that you must ask for something, you are unconsciously affirming that you are lacking. And when you believe you lack, you send out the frequency of lack to the universe. Every word you speak afterward, no matter how sacred it sounds, is merely a shell covering, a vibration trembling with fear. But when you say thank you, not because something has arrived, but because you believe it has always existed, your entire being shifts from the vibration of scarcity to a state of union with abundance. You no longer pray as someone standing outside the gate, but as the one holding the key and unlocking it with complete trust. There's no need to paint this with religious or philosophical theory. Just observe yourself. In your hardest moments, if you can still utter the words, thank you, something strange happens. Your mind calms, your breath softens, and an invisible door opens within. A place where you feel you are not alone, not abandoned, not at the mercy of blind fate. In that moment, gratitude is no longer a ritual. It becomes a bridge reconnecting you with the order of the divine. And that is when you stop asking, because you realize that what you once begged for has never actually been absent. When you say thank you for health, you're not pretending to be strong. You are declaring that life is still flowing through you, even if the body is in a process of healing. When you say thank you for love, you're not deluding yourself into thinking everyone loves you. You are awakening the loving vibration that already exists, so it becomes a magnet for relationships on the same frequency. When you say thank you for abundance, you are not denying your financial reality. You are refusing to label yourself as lacking, and instead affirming the infinite spiritual resources you have the right to access. You cannot broadcast a signal of asking and simultaneously receive the fullness of life. They are two different maps of consciousness. One radiates anxiety, smallness, helplessness, always looking toward the future with pleading eyes. The other radiates peace, trust, and gratitude in the now, as if goodness has already been assigned and is simply waiting for your permission to be received. And the moment you shift from asking to thanking is the moment you move from being someone waiting outside to someone stepping inside. Gratitude is not what you say when everything goes well. It is what you say to make things go well, because when you give thanks, you are synchronizing with a higher order, where there is no randomness, no chaos, only perfect manifestations according to levels of consciousness. It is where you stop behaving like someone fleeing from problems and begin standing still to let the light pass through. Gratitude is not a method to trade for rewards. It is a way of remembering that the reward has already been placed in your hands long before you ever learned to beg for it. You may be thinking, how can I give thanks when I don't yet have what I want? The answer is, because you don't need to see in order to believe, you need to believe in order to see. If you wait for proof before giving thanks, you are living in a passive state where all good things happen only when circumstances allow. But if you give thanks first, you are shifting into an active state where you no longer need the world to change in order to feel whole. That wholeness will begin to change the world around you. Gratitude is an expression of spiritual intelligence. It doesn't come from luck, it comes from awareness. When you say thank you, you are laying down the habits of judgment, comparison, and blame. You no longer ask, why is this happening to me? But begin to ask, what is this opening up for me? And in that very question, you have already started living as a creator, no longer a victim of circumstance, but a force that shapes reality. The language of asking always carries the vibration of powerlessness, but the language of thanking is a declaration of someone who has awakened. That person does not need to prove anything, does not need to manipulate outcomes, does not need to rush. They walk as if goodness has already been arranged. They act as if invisible support is always behind them. They are silent with a deep trust that everything is unfolding for a greater good. They don't even need to fully understand. That is not wishful thinking. That is inner power activated by one simple choice. Instead of asking, say thank you. And like every genuine spiritual choice, this does not need validation. You don't need to announce to the world how much you've thanked, because the world will feel it through the energy you radiate. The peace in your eyes, the steadiness in your steps, the lightness in your reactions, the quiet determination in how you face adversity. Those who live in gratitude do not need to proclaim it. They are the living proof of abundance. Starting today, gently observe yourself. Every time you're about to plead, pause for a second and try saying thank you for the guidance that has always been present. Thank you for the lesson that is unfolding. Thank you for the goodness you cannot yet see, but trust is approaching. And just like that, you will see life change, not because you forced it to change, but because you have changed your relationship with it. You are no longer the one begging. You have become a companion of life itself. That is where every miracle begins. Not where you ask to receive, but where you give thanks knowing you have always had. No one can attract God, because God has never been absent. You cannot draw the divine presence closer, nor can you push it away. You can only open the door to allow it to step forth from where it has always been, within you. Presence does not need you to plead, does not require effort, and certainly does not wait for you to prove anything. It needs only one thing, that you stop resisting. Because while you are busy seeking God, that presence is patiently waiting for you to stop getting lost in your own thoughts. This is the most common misconception on the spiritual path. You believe you must reach a certain level, endure enough hardship, maintain strict discipline, or purify enough sins to become worthy of sensing the divine presence. But the truth is the complete opposite. Those efforts, if born from a sense of lack, only push you further from the state of allowing. Presence is not conquered through merit. It is not a reward for piety. It is the foundation of all life. It was already there before you began your search. You do not attract that presence. You are made of it. And when you stop trying to find it, you begin to realize you have always been within it. Imagine the sun shining brightly in the sky. Whether you're in a dark room, whether the curtains are closed, whether your eyes are shut, the sun is still there. Not because you feel it, it exists, and not because you can't see it, it disappears. The issue is never the light, it is your own closure. In the same way, God is not far, he is never moved. You don't need to open the door, and that door is not a ritual, not an outward form, it is an interaction. The dismantling of old beliefs in separation. Every time you worry, every time you doubt, every time you live with the mindset that you must do something to deserve love, you are closing that door. Not with sin, but with ignorance. Ignorance is when you forget you are made of presence. Ignorance is when you believe you are outside of a light in which you are actually enveloped, and when you live in that ignorance long enough, you start to search for light outside. In achievements, in roles, in recognition. You think that if you become more successful, kinder, or morally upright, you will feel closer to God. But God does not respond to reasons. He needs no reason to be with you. He only needs you to recognize what has always been true. You and he have never been two. You don't need to attract presence. You only need to awaken it. And that awakening is not a grand event. There is no thunder or blinding light. It begins in a very small moment when you stop running, stop seeking, stop judging, stop thinking you need to be forgiven in order to return. You only need to sit down, breathe slowly, and acknowledge, I was never abandoned. In that moment, presence does not arrive. It simply reveals itself, because you have stopped covering it up with the layers of consciousness built from fear, shame, and illusion. Presence requires no condition to operate. It doesn't demand that you be pure in order to connect. It only waits for you to stop identifying with false stories about yourself. When you say, I'm not good enough to be near God, you are asserting a contradiction, because God has no place to be near, and you cannot be apart from what you are made of. You don't need to go anywhere to find him. You only need to stay still within yourself. But that very thing, being still within yourself, is the hardest for modern humans. We are pulled out of center by noise, by images, by comparison, by the desire to perform. In that chaotic flow, you do not lose God. You only lose your capacity to recognize him. Like a person in a bustling city who cannot hear the gentle sound of flowing water behind him, not because the water isn't flowing, but because he has never paused to listen. Presence is always gentle, never forceful, never imposing. It respects your freedom to choose. You have the right to ignore it. But when you are ready, a single mindful breath is enough to pass through the veil. Awakening presence is a subtle act of consciousness. You don't need to name it. You don't need to repeat rituals. Just one silent moment in which you are no longer guided by the question, what must I do? And instead ask, what must I release? Because every effort to seek presence is futile if you're still clinging to the ego story that says you are on the outside. Only when you dare to let go of that story will you make space to receive the light that has always awaited you. The spiritual journey is not a mountain climb to a higher place. It is a shedding of old garments to return to where you have always belonged. Presence does not need to be invited, it only needs to be received. And you do not need to attract anything. You only need to be quiet enough to hear the call from the deepest part of yourself, the part that has never left you. When that silence speaks, every prayer becomes unnecessary, every effort weightless, and you, without needing to do anything more, become the most perfect expression of the living God. Presence does not come from the outside in. It is only awakened from within, not because you have become more worthy, but because you have ceased to reject your own divine nature. And when you live from that place, nothing needs to be forced. Everything will begin to realign, not because you manipulated it, but because you have stopped resisting the natural flow of what is right. When presence is awakened, you no longer need to seek the answer, because you become the answer, quietly, steadily, completely. Nothing happens outside of you without reflecting something within you. Every experience in life, whether it's a chance encounter, a seemingly unfair failure, or an unexpected opportunity, is a precise manifestation of the content you carry in your mind and the vibration you emit in silence. The world does not speak through words, it speaks through correspondence. And every circumstance, every person who appears is the most honest mirror of what you believe to be true, sometimes so deep that you don't even realize you're believing it. Pause and ask yourself, have you ever gone through repeated cycles, the same situations happening over and over in different forms, but leaving the exact same emotional imprint? That is not a coincidence. That is a signal. Because when you haven't changed an inner belief, the universe continues to send you experiences of the same frequency, so you can reflect, not to punish, but to awaken. A person who is repeatedly rejected may believe they are unworthy of love, but it is precisely that silent belief that emits the frequency drawing in those experiences of rejection, so they have the opportunity to realize that what needs healing does not lie outside, but in the image they hold of themselves. The world is a classroom, and every experience is a test showing you which inner lesson remains incomplete. When you continue to blame circumstances, people, or luck, you separate yourself from your inner power. But when you dare to look directly at the reflection, you'll understand. Every time the world hurts you, it is holding up a mirror to show where within you you are still hurting yourself. And when you change your reaction, your perception, your belief, the world also changes how it responds to you, not because it has been reprogrammed, but because you've just rewritten the frequency you broadcast. Everything you see on the outside is your internal blueprint being printed onto the external world. You cannot live in doubt and expect life to trust you. You cannot live in shame and expect others to respect you. You cannot carry victim energy and expect to be empowered. There is no sustainable deception in the architecture of consciousness. Every time you try to pretend that you're fine while inside you are fractured, life will bring you experiences to expose the crack, not to shame you, but to stop you from living disconnected from yourself. You cannot change the world by trying to fix it. You can only change the world by becoming a different frequency and letting the world recalibrate itself to you. When you shift from fear to trust, fearful people will naturally drift away, and those who match your new frequency will find you. When you no longer view life as a battle, you stop attracting battles. When you stop seeing yourself as a victim, you will no longer be at the center of repeated tragedy. It all begins from within. And only when you view the world as a mirror do you begin to live as someone who truly holds power. What matters most is that you are honest with yourself, because reflections do not lie. If life is treating you with coldness, that is your moment to ask, where have I been cold to myself? If others don't listen to you, ask yourself, how long have I ignored my own inner voice? If you are constantly rejected, betrayed, or disrespected, it's possible you're unconsciously colluding with it through an unresolved belief. No experience is random. Every experience carries a message. The question is, are you willing to read it with humility and maturity? Realizing that the world is a reflection doesn't mean harshly loading yourself with blame. It simply means you have the power to change your life experience at any moment by going within and retuning your internal frequency. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what belief within me is this reflecting? And that question, when asked with an open heart, will lead you to the very root of what's holding you back. And once the root is seen, there is no need to fight. You simply transform. Every day you are broadcasting a frequency into the universe, not through words, but through your state of being. And the universe doesn't respond to your desires, it responds to your frequency. You may pray for peace, but if you live with an anxious mindset, you will still attract disorder. You may say you want love, but if you don't love yourself, you'll only attract craving, not real love. Nothing outside can surpass the limits of what you're allowing inside. And once you understand this, you stop waiting for others to change. Stop needing the world to treat you differently. You go inward and correct the root. Ultimately, you didn't come here to master the world. You came here to master yourself. And the world, in its honest and perfect way, will do its part to reflect you. Every detail, every vibration, every belief, until you truly awaken and live as someone who remembers who they are. No need to control anyone, no need to resist anything. Just live in truth, and everything outside will adjust itself. That is the silent but undeniable power of someone who knows the world does not betray you, it only reflects you. No word is ever spoken without first passing through a thought. Every sound you make is the final result of an invisible sequence operating within your mind. Thought is the blueprint. Speech is the form. You cannot create a sentence that doesn't originate from some internal thought process already in motion. And what's even more crucial is this: the thoughts you don't consciously manage will become unconscious words that shape your reality in ways you're not even aware of. Every word you speak, whether mumbled to yourself or shared with others, carries the energy of the thought that gave birth to it. And like a seed once planted into reality, that word begins to carve pathways in your consciousness, subtly guiding what you will experience next. When you say, "I'm exhausted," you're doing more than describing a state. You're feeding energy into the pattern of fatigue, extending its lifespan in your body. When you repeat, "I can't," you're not just reflecting a temporary feeling, you're closing the door to actions you might have taken had the originating thought not been constrained. Every sentence you speak starts with a belief you've once accepted as true. And the deeper truth is, most of us don't realize those beliefs aren't absolute truths. They're just patterns that have been repeated for too long. Thought is the architect of speech. But not every thought should be allowed to exit as words, because once you speak it, you label reality. And when you label something long enough, you begin to live as if that label were truth. Some people constantly say, "I'm always unlucky," as if it's a casual remark. What they don't understand is that this repetition trains their brain to adjust its entire perceptual system to only see the negative and to overlook every sign of the positive. When you program the thought, "Everything's against me," then even if reality isn't that way, your mind will constantly search for evidence to validate that belief, because that's how the brain protects what it's already accepted as truth. And from there, the words you speak, instead of liberating you, become chains pulling you backward a little more each day. Thought can be free, but once it becomes speech, it carries force. If you don't carefully choose which thoughts you allow to pass through your mind, you won't be able to control what you're creating with your words each day. A single sentence can heal, but it can also destroy. Not because words are magical, but because speech is the gateway through which thought energy enters the material world. When you say, "I believe I will overcome this," even if you see no way out yet, you are activating an internal code, leading you to actions and choices that confirm that belief. Conversely, if you say, "I know I'll fail," you're not only planting fear, You're programming yourself to reject every opportunity that comes your way. Take a moment to reflect on your daily language habits. Do the words you use carry the energy of hope or doubt? Do you often say, I have to, or I choose to? Are you speaking about yourself with the voice of someone who holds inner power, or as a tired victim? There is no universally correct answer, only honesty. And if you're brave enough to look closely, you'll see many of the words you use have unconsciously sustained an outdated self-pity that you should have let go of long ago. But you cannot speak anew if you do not first think anew. And you cannot think anew if you continue to maintain the same environment, consume the same inputs, and surround yourself with people who mirror the same negative language patterns you do. To change your reality, you don't need to force yourself to speak artificially positive words. You only need to do something simpler. Observe the thought before it becomes speech. Place a pause. A moment of mindfulness. When you find yourself about to say, I'm not special, pause and ask, what thought is making me feel this way? When you're about to say, I know I'll fail, stop and ask, who planted that thought in me? Is it true? Does it still need to live inside me? Every time you ask, you are removing a brick from the wall of old beliefs. And each time you choose silence, over repeating an unconscious sentence, you are taking a powerful step toward your inner freedom. Remember, speech is not the beginning. Thought is where it all starts. And if you want to speak words that uplift, inspire, and expand the doorways of reality, you must begin by nurturing a stream of thoughts that are clear, strong, and intentional. You cannot cover up broken thoughts with elegant speech. That dissonance will be felt even if not heard, because energy does not lie. So instead of trying to fix your words from the outside, fix the source, the thoughts you accept as true each day. Ultimately, what shapes your life is not just what you do, but what you say over and over again, and where those words come from. If you want your words to carry power, train your thoughts like an artisan. If you want to speak with weight, think thoughts of value. If you want to create a new reality, start with new thought patterns, because you are the creator of your words, and the words you create will return to shape you, not by magic, but by law, the law of thought, the silent but absolute blueprint of everything you are living. Emotion is the current that powers every declaration. Thought creates the mold. Speech gives it form, but without vibrant emotion flowing through it, the entire structure remains an unlit sculpture. You can affirm, I am peace 100 times a day, but if your inner state is still trembling, anxious, doubtful, that statement only brushes the surface of language. It won't penetrate the deeper layers of subconscious programming, but when a statement is supported by aligned emotion, an internal energy field resonant with what is being declared, life's laws register it, the body responds, behavior adjusts, and circumstances begin to realign, not because the words are better, but because emotion has allowed the truth to enter the bloodstream. The first distinction to make, reactive emotions and spiritual emotions are not the same. Reactive emotions stem from an agitated ego, joy from praise, anger from criticism, excitement when lucky, collapse in loss. They surge and vanish, flare up and fade. If you use these to fuel your declarations, the results will be unstable. Belief one day, doubt the next. Spiritual emotion, I call it soul sense, is not dependent on outer conditions. It is a foundational calm state, warm but not impulsive, steady but not rigid, like sap in a tree, not showy but nourishing every branch and leaf. When you declare from this state, I am vitality, I am abundance, I am guided, the words take root. They don't need to be shouted. They need to be deeply trusted. The body is the verification switch. You might say you are at peace, but if your shoulders are tense, your jaw clenched, your breathing shallow, your nervous system is signaling there's no harmony between your words and your emotional state. Don't force belief, adjust your state. Place your hand on your chest, lengthen your exhale, relax your neck muscles, allow your belly to move freely. When the body shifts into physiological safety, You'll find it easier to believe, easier to feel, and your declaration will sink deeper. This isn't merely psychology, it's coherence. Body, emotion, thought, and word must align on the same axis for energy to transmit without leakage. Recall the moments when you truly believed something beautiful about yourself, perhaps something small, solving a difficult problem, helping someone you care about, overcoming an awkward situation. In those moments, you didn't need to shout, "I'm great." Your whole body emitted the signal. Your chest opened, your energy lightened, your eyes brightened. That's spiritual emotion affirming a new identity. Your task now is to consciously recreate that state and link it to higher declarations. Don't wait for inspiration to drop in. Train your body to feel value first and let the words follow. When you say, "I am growing value," while your body is open and your heart soft, the nervous system stores that configuration as a new template. With enough repetition, that template becomes your default. A common trap: faking emotion. You hear about the power of feeling and try to generate positive vibes. The problem is that forced optimism often masks unacknowledged fear. You don't need to exaggerate. Spiritual emotion is not about intensity. It's an authentic agreement between awareness and being. If today you don't yet feel abundant enough to say, "I am infinite prosperity," go one step at a time. I open to the flow of goodness. I allow support to come to me. Each declaration must match your level of belief. Higher than old habits, but not so far that your mind triggers resistance. A small belief felt genuinely is more powerful than a large declaration said hollowly. One of the fastest ways to connect emotion to speech is through embodied gratitude. Don't just say thanks with your mind, feel it in your body. When you say thank you for the life within me, simultaneously tune in to your heartbeat, the warmth in your palms, the air moving through your lungs. Bodily attention increases emotional density, helping your declaration fuse with concrete sensation, making it harder for the mind to deny. From this base of gratitude, you introduce an affirmation: "I am life expanding," and the body has already allied with you before doubt can intervene. Practice. Choose a core declaration. Short, clear, aligned with your current stage of growth. For example, "I am peaceful intelligence." Sit upright but relaxed. Breathe in for 4 counts, exhale for 6. As you breathe out, soften your face, shoulders, and belly. Place a hand on your chest. Speak the affirmation slowly, either silently or aloud. After saying it, don't repeat immediately. Pause for a few seconds to feel where the statement resonates in your body. Is the chest warming? Is the belly lighter? Is there a lump in the throat? If there's tightness, don't resist. Breathe into that area, like watering dry soil. Repeat 3 to 5 rounds, allowing the emotion to deepen with each pass. You are training your nervous system to associate relaxation with a new identity. That is how words begin to become real. Don't be surprised if uncomfortable emotions surface when you affirm something positive. These are the old beliefs being touched by light. Instead of retreating, see it as proof you're working in the right place. Embrace the emotion, breathe through it, then return to the affirmation with a deeper, truer voice. Each time you remain present with an emotion rather than withdraw, you sever the link between old history and your current identity. This is emotional reprogramming, where words alone cannot reach. Finally, trust this: emotion is not an enemy to be controlled. It is fuel waiting to be refined. When you let reactive emotion drive your speech, you create chaos. When you distill emotion into a field of gratitude, trust, and unconditional love, your words carry the weight of soul. And when words are soul-infused, reality must respond. Because the universe always answers where higher life is present. You are that place. As long as every declaration you live is powered by genuine, pure emotion in harmony with the deepest truth of your being. Speech is not merely a medium of communication. It is a tool of creation. Every time you utter a sentence, you are doing more than arranging words, you are shaping reality. And the most crucial thing to note, once words have been spoken, they cannot be taken back. Even if you retract, apologize, or correct yourself, the vibration carried by those words has already been released into your energy field, has reached others' ears, entered their brains, hearts, memories, and even subconscious. Just like an arrow that has left the bow, you cannot call it back. You can only take responsibility for the direction in which you aimed. People often downplay throwaway phrases, just for fun remarks, habitual expressions like, I can't do it, my life is so unlucky, I'm just so tired. Yet these repeated statements, drip by drip each day, are carving out the very outlines of your identity portrait. And when words are spoken with emotion, positive or negative, they become code sent straight into the subconscious, the place that governs all behavior, choices, beliefs, and outcomes you attract. In other words, you cannot live differently from what you have repeatedly declared as I. Therefore, understand that words don't just describe, they dictate. If you say, I'm an impatient person, you are instructing your brain to install reactive patterns aligned with frustration whenever delay arises. If you say, I'm easily hurt, you are programming your nervous system to react with fragility at the slightest hint of rejection. That is why the unchecked words you speak become shackles tightening around your identity with no one else to blame. It is you who repeated them, unaware that you were cementing a thought-action pattern you would later be forced to live by. But the good news is, if you've once misprogrammed yourself with words, you can reprogram yourself with words. The key is to truly understand the power of speech as a creative instrument, not as flair, not as positive talk, but as a means of actual transformation. To do that, you need three things: awareness, discernment, and consistency. Awareness is the wakefulness before each word is spoken. It demands that you pause for a moment before speaking to clear that the world cannot help but listen. And to do this, they don't try to become special. They simply peel away the layers of false belief so that their true essence is finally allowed to speak. You don't need to manifest in order to become someone. You already are. Every manifestation is merely confirmation of your purpose. It's purpose, not a climb upward, but an outflow. Like a fragrance that doesn't try to prove it's a flower, it just emanates from its nature. Like music that doesn't try to be heard, it simply vibrates when it finds resonant silence. True manifestation is like this, not forced, not manipulative, not grasping. It is the natural result of an inner self that is aligned with the source and ready for that source to express itself through the form of a human being. So from now on, whenever you desire something, ask yourself, if this happens, what of God will I use it to express? If you don't yet have an answer, don't rush, pause. Ask deeper, because when your reason is pure enough, your manifestation will be strong enough. When your purpose is sacred enough, the path will reveal itself. And when you live as the instrument instead of the center, then the truly great will begin to move through you gently, precisely, lovingly, as if it had been orchestrated long ago, simply waiting for you to remember. I am is not merely a phrase you utter in silence. It is the foundational energy, the radiating field you emit in every glance, every gesture, every thought and spoken word. And you cannot disconnect from it because it doesn't reside in your mouth, it resides in your being. Whether you are aware of it or not, you are constantly declaring I am to the world, not with words, but with your presence. And because this world is not separate from you, but simply an extension of the consciousness you hold within, what you identify with internally is exactly what you will encounter externally sooner or later. Everything you see, touch, feel, and live is a refined replica of the I am signal you're sending out. If you feel the world is cold, chaotic, and threatening, that is not an objective truth, but a faithful reflection of the I am, small I am, threatened identity within you. Conversely, if you see the world as abundant, expansive, safe, and full of opportunities, That's because within you has already been declared, I am part of abundance. I am supported. And the truth is, there is no absolute reality. There is only the mirror you are looking into and the way you are standing before it. I am does not only radiate when you are silently meditating. It is expressed through how you wake up, how you eat, how you listen to others, how you face challenges, and even how you handle the smallest details of daily life. Because the world does not just listen to what you say, it feels what you believe. And it doesn't return to you what you want, but what you have already agreed is true about yourself. When you understand that I am is operating nonstop, you begin to make more conscious choices. You stop living on autopilot. You no longer allow yourself to speak things like, I am a failure, I am not enough, or even I am someone who doesn't know who I am. Because every time you identify in this way, you are not only reinforcing an old reality, you are using your own creative energy to carve it deeper once again. And then you wonder why you remain stuck, why your circumstances don't change. The truth is, they are simply doing exactly what you commanded. Once you accept that I am is everywhere, you stop blaming the outside. You begin to turn inward and take ownership of your presence. You understand that instead of trying to control the world, you only need to change the signal you're sending out. Because the world doesn't need to be convinced. It only needs to be synchronized. And synchronization always happens from the inside out, never the other way around. The world is a mirror so precise that it does not respond to your wishes, but to the clarity of the I am you hold. If within you there is still doubt, confusion, and inner conflict, the world will reflect that fragmentation through your relationships, situations, and emotions. But if inside you begin to stabilize, to clarify, to align, and stay loyal to a strong inner declaration like I am a creator, I am the presence of God, then the world will gradually reconfigure itself to match the new frequency you are transmitting. No one is coming to save you, and no one can stop you, because the world does not operate according to others, but according to you. It's not about how you are, and then the world responds. It's that who you believe you are. The world is programmed to validate that belief. This mechanism is not biased, emotional, or conditional. It is neutral, like gravity. Whoever jumps will fall, regardless of right or wrong. And likewise, whoever sends out, I am not enough, will receive a reality that confirms it, not out of punishment, but out of honesty. You may not be able to control every situation, but you always control how you identify within that situation. In chaos, you can still choose, I am peace. In loss, you can still hold, I am guided. In darkness, you can still declare, I am light. And when you hold that declaration long enough, the world, which is merely a projection screen, will have to adjust its content to match the signal you broadcast. The secret of manifestation doesn't lie in controlling circumstances, but in mastering your presence. Two people may live in the same neighborhood, with the same job, the same financial situation, but if their I am is different, then their lives will gradually move in completely different directions. Because the world is not programmed by logic, it is driven by frequency. And frequency is not based on outer actions, but on inner identity. If you want to change your reality, don't begin with plans, strategies, or control. Begin with I am. Examine every thought, every reaction, every spoken word, and ask, what is this declaring I am? If it doesn't align with the person you are choosing to become, pause, shift, and declare again, not just with your words, but with your entire presence. When you live as if your I am is rewriting the world, you'll realize you were never a victim of circumstance. You were simply an architect not yet awakened to a reality waiting to be edited. And that edit does not begin by changing others, changing the environment, or changing your luck, but by awakening in each moment to the truth that I am is everywhere, and therefore I can begin again at any time as long as I dare to redefine myself. Have you ever tried to control everything? Tried to keep everyone happy, to keep work perfect, to keep life's turbulence from breaking you down? How did that feel? Was it exhausting, anxious, and insecure? Because deep down you know the world cannot be controlled. The more you try to hold on, the more it slips through your fingers like sand. Because the world was not created for you to control, but to remind you that true power doesn't lie in outer control, but in maintaining your inner center. The I Am Center is not a fixed location, but a state of presence. It's the still point in the heart of a storm. It's the clarity of vision in a chaotic world. It's the place where you are no longer caught in reaction, but choose to live from a grounded stillness. When you stay anchored in that center, you no longer need to control anyone, force anything, or chase after anything. Everything begins to adjust around you like metal drawn to a magnet, not because you're stronger, but because you no longer waste your energy resisting. You become magnetic, not through effort, but through stability. The world is chaotic not because that is its nature, but because most people operate from a mind that is also chaotic. They have no center, so they are pulled in every direction: praise, criticism, approval, rejection, others' expectations, societal pressure, fear of failure. And when there is no stable center, they begin trying to control everything outside to create a temporary sense of safety. But that's a battle you'll never win, because the more you try to control, the more you become dependent on what you're trying to hold, the more afraid you are to lose it, and so you lose your freedom. In contrast, the person who stays centered in I Am is unshaken by anything external. They do not live to please the world. They do not react according to others' expectations. They do not let their identity be shaped by circumstances, because they've chosen a declaration strong enough within. I am stability. I am peace. I am the one who creates reality through presence. And when they live from that place, the world no longer needs to be controlled. It begins to cooperate, not because they control everything, but because they are no longer victims of anything. To stay centered doesn't mean you don't act, don't feel, or don't move through change. It means you still feel, but you don't drown. You still face what comes, but you don't panic. You still move forward, but not through force. Like the sun, it doesn't chase after any planet, yet it remains the center around which all orbits align themselves. The I Am Center is the same. You don't need to chase anything. Just stand firm, and everything will begin to return to you as a natural response. If your life feels chaotic, it's not because it's too complex, but because you've forgotten your center. You've let your energy scatter into too many unnecessary places: what others say, things you can't control, far-off expectations, imaginary fears. But when you gather that energy back to a single point, a steady, clear declaration, you begin to transform. And you realize you don't need to change the entire world, you just need to stay anchored in yourself. From there, every action you take no longer comes from urgency or worry, but from a calm flow. You no longer react, you respond. You are no longer pulled, you choose your direction. You no longer need applause, you have conviction from within. And that creates a quiet yet profound power of persuasion. People won't be able to name it, but they will feel it. You are different, not by your words, but by your presence. By the way you don't try to make people like you, yet they trust you. By the way you don't try to win arguments, yet they listen. By the way you don't need to prove anything, yet your presence is proof enough. Let the world keep spinning, shifting, sometimes chaotic, but you be the unmoving point at its center. You don't need to calm the waves. You just need to steady the oar. And the I Am Center is that oar. It keeps you from being shattered by emotional storms, from being spun by outer pressure, from drifting by what others say about you. You hold that center like a gatekeeper, and everything else will fall into its proper place. There is no need to control, only to stay centered, because from that still point, everything you need will be drawn to you, not through pressure, but through synchronization, not through struggle, but through deep presence. And then you will realize you are not someone being spun around by the world. You are the center allowing the world to orbit you, held by a peace so unshakable because it comes from the deepest place within you. I am. You don't need to become something new. You only need to remember. Every journey of personal growth, every yearning for awakening, every method of transformation ultimately leads you not to a different destination, but back to yourself. Not the small ego, not the title society has assigned to you, but the pure essence, the place where you have never been separated from the divine. It's the place where you have never been defined by failure or success, never distorted by judgment or old wounds. The place where you don't need to try to become anything because you already are. The greatest journey in life is not about seeking, but about integration. Not about going further, but about returning. Not about crafting an ideal self, but about removing the layers that made you forget who you truly are. You cannot manifest anything truly profound if you believe it must come from effort, because effort is often a symptom of disconnection when you believe that what you need lies somewhere outside of you and you must reach out to grab it. But the truth is, the most powerful things don't come from striving, they come from allowing. And you can only allow when you are integrated, when you are no longer in conflict with yourself, no longer denying the sacred power already within you. At that point, you no longer operate from a state of wanting to have, but from the state of already being. You no longer build the future out of fear, but manifest the present from wholeness. Every declaration, every action, every decision becomes powerful not because you are forcing yourself to prove something, but because they come from a place of deep connection within, where you are no longer separate from the Creator, from life, from yourself. When you are integrated, you no longer try to control others in order to be loved, because you understand that love does not come from possession, but from unconditional presence. You no longer rush to achieve something in order to feel worthy, because you realize worth is inherent, not earned through action, but bestowed through being. And when you live from that integrated space, you move gently, yet make the world tremble, because you no longer live as a fragmented individual, but as an extension of the universal intelligence flowing through you. Everything you have ever chased after has in truth never been far from you. Success, peace, abundance, love, wisdom, they don't lie ahead of you, but within your capacity to remember who you are. That is why the greatest masters do not teach you how to run faster, but how to pause. Not how to control more, but how to surrender. Not how to impress others, but how to face yourself. Because only when you remove the mask of expectations, fears, and biases do you touch the pure essence that has never been wounded. And at that point, everything you once thought was a goal now simply becomes a natural expression. You don't need to preach integration. You only need to live from it. People will feel it. Through the way you look, you touch, you listen, you are present. Through the completeness you bring to a moment, to a space, to a relationship. You don't need to justify. You don't need to prove. You only need to be. And that alone is enough to remind others of the deepest part within themselves. If you've reached the end of this journey and have walked through the chapters of I am, gratitude, presence, reflection, action, grace, then know this: none of these parts are separate. They are pieces of one single truth. You don't need to try to become the light. You already are the light. You don't need to create something new. You only need to remove the fog that made you forget. And when you do that, you don't just change your life. You become the mirror that helps others begin their remembering. Integration is not a specific action. It is a state of realizing that nothing more needs to be done. only to stop resisting, stop denying, stop running. When you can sit with yourself and not feel empty, that's a sign you're returning to integration. When you look at another without judgment, without comparison, without wishing they were like you, that's a sign you're living from a place no longer divided. When you no longer ask, who should I be, and instead begin to whisper, I remember now, that is when you are truly returning home. Let this final part not be an ending, but a doorway into a new way of living. A way of life not driven by outcomes, not fueled by lack, not distracted by illusion. A life in which you wake up and say to the universe, I know who I am, and I allow the divine to live through me today. There is no need to create something new, no need to chase any ideal. You only need to remember and live from that remembrance as the most complete expression of the light you have always carried within you.